I'm Mary Lyons, the Wealth Woman.
I'm Eric Alexander with Acorn Grove.
Welcome to the Wealth and Income Podcast. We're excited to have you back with us today if you're a longtime listener, and good to have you for the first time. If this is your first time checking us out, we are actually going to do a follow-up from a previous podcast that we did recently where we talked about test driving your dreams. And literally, in Eric's case, test driving his dreams. So, Eric, why don't you kick us off by just kind of explaining the reason you decided to do things the way you did, and then let's talk through the outcomes.
Yeah, so the short version of it is I love driving manual cars, or I thought I did, and I'd driven them for a long time, 10, 15 years, and I fell in love with it, and I've been bored with my car, if that's a thing. And I'm like, I need a fast sports car that I can like power around a corner and blah, blah, blah. And then I thought the prudent side of me says, what if I just think I remember that it was fun and that it didn't really end up being fun? And so I thought, well, instead of spending 5 figures on a car and then finding out that I don't like it and it was terrible, why don't I spend 3 figures on a car, $300 instead of 40 grand, 50 grand, and then figure out if I really like it for a weekend and like actually live with the car, like, you know, go to church, pick up kids, go to the grocery store, go to the donut shop, whatever, drive the car around.
Can I jump in for just a second? Because I want to latch on to something that you just said at the very beginning that I think is so key, right? And this is the kind of stuff that when we think about what we want, we aren't always completely honest with ourselves about what we remember, or we tend to remember the best parts of it. So when you just said, I remember loving this, or I think I did, I think that's so key, because an easy parallel that I think people can go back to is we've all been in a relationship that ended and we're like, but I remember the good parts of this. And then we get back into that relationship and we're like, what was I thinking? There's a reason that I ended this relationship the first time.
Right.
So what you're saying about the car is I think I loved this relationship, but I don't really remember. So maybe I need to try it out again.
And then I had kids. And the reason we got rid of the car was because the car was too small. It didn't fit everyone in. And so I had to do the prudent thing and get a larger car to fit car seats. So I rented that car to go test that out, basically testing it out for a weekend and then coming back at the end of it and going, how did that go? It was sort of the gist of it.
Well, and the beauty of this is we teach a concept where you make a list of all your dreams and you do it by categories, and it's really very in-depth, and it includes what's purposeful and what's just for enjoyment. But it's an exercise, and it's an ongoing exercise. And the feedback we've gotten is that it's fantastic because it does change the cadence of your life, right? When you are realizing a dream every month, there's something that you just did that was very exciting, and then there's something to look forward to. And you may hear that and you're like, oh my God, that's too many dreams. How would I possibly do that? But not all the dreams have to be really big dreams either. So they can be smaller dreams that are happening. But what I love about what you're talking about is before you make a major investment or contribution towards what you think is your dream, you're setting up a situation where you can explore it and make sure that the decision you're making is not emotionally driven, that it's also logically driven. So even if the root is emotional enjoyment, what you're doing is you're approaching it in a very logical and prudent way. And I feel like that keeps coming up right now.
Yeah, well, and the back end of it is this giant battle, right? And so the spoiler alert is I really, really, really loved it. I really loved it. I love that car.
You cross it off your list and here you are.
Yeah. And so that now it becomes the second question of, okay, well, is it still prudent or not? Or is this just, it's not the right time. There's lots of other stuff we got to go do. I have to adult. And so it becomes then the question of, okay, well, how do you make it fit? If it really, okay, that was a good thing. And it was a good thing by itself. One of the things I found at the other end of driving that car, it was a VW Golf, if you've ever seen one of those. It's not a very attractive car, like empirically, it's not a sports car.
Most people would be like, dang, that's on my list.
Correct. Right. Ferraris, Aston Martins, Golf. Which one of these is not like the other? Right. And so that was that feeling. Right. But the thing that I loved about it was like, I don't really care that it's not on anybody's list. Mm-hmm. And I thought I might, because you'd mentioned that last time in our podcast. It's like, well, it's not a Ferrari. Or you had the Porsche. Like, I really want the Porsche, but part of me that wants the Porsche is just because it's a Porsche. Like, have you seen my Porsche? Right. And so one of the things I noticed in that is
when you drive it down the street, right? I mean, that's the That's what you're talking about, is
Correct.
the attachment to how other people perceive you because of what you're driving, right?
Correct. And
Yeah.
nobody looks at that car going, that guy's arrived. Nobody.
Right.
You know, and then I still wanted it, and it was like, okay, well then it's not about ego, it's just about my enjoyment of the
Right.
vehicle, right, of the process.
Well, and I love that, Eric, because we used to talk about this book Wanting by Luke Burgess all the
Yeah,
time. Like I feel like
yeah,
it
yeah,
came
yeah,
up
great book.
all the time. And it's really about understanding what part of your desires are intrinsic and internal, and which part of your desires are created by external pressures or messaging, or just the desire to fit, right? I mean,
Right.
there's a I don't know that there is a VW golf club that meets up on the weekend, but there is a Porsche club that meets on the weekend, right? And the people who
Right.
go to that have a certain demographic, or, pretend they have a certain demographic in some cases. But when you kind of look at all of that, I think the thing that you're really saying is that you were able to nail down that this was not a thin desire that is motivated by external factors, that has nothing to do with it actually brings you satisfaction. This is like driving a manual car is a thick desire for you, meaning it is an internal, this is something I want for me. And then we'll see what car
Right.
you actually get. I'm just going to put that here as a little
Well,
bookmarker.
so it won't, the spoiler alert is it won't be a Golf because I have to have a car that functions inside of our family. And it's not
Right.
like we've got like 8 kids. We have 2 boys, but they're not short kids,
And a
and
lot
they're
of
getting
soccer
taller,
equipment.
and a lot of soccer and all sorts of equipment, right? And so it's not practical. And as
Right.
my wife Amy talked about it, she's like, it's so small. I feel like it's like coming in on me, like we're in this like driving coffin,
Claustrophobic.
right? Yeah. And her joke as we were driving around this past weekend, she's like, notice all the people that drive Golfs are like poor college people. Like, is that really what you want? So she's
She's like,
like,
I don't
this.
care.
Yeah, and I'm like, and that's the point. At the end of the day, I'm like, yeah, whatever. It's still what I want. So we're looking at different. Well, I'm looking at different cars
Yeah,
that
she's
fit
not
the
looking
family.
at it, to be honest.
No, no, she thinks it's dumb. Still,
That's okay, right? I mean, I do think that your spouse doesn't always have to be on board with your dreams or buy into them, as long as they support them, right? And as long as it's prudent, I
right?
don't think she cares.
No, yeah. Let's don't be homeless
Now, if
because
you
of your
if you
stupid
bought
whim.
that, right, but if you bought the golf and then couldn't cart the kids around, that's a problem, right? I mean, I think this goes
Right.
back to when two people have different visions for what their dream life looks like. How do you find the middle? And it is really about deciding which part of this is negotiable and which part of this is not negotiable.
Right.
And I think in your case, what is not negotiable is wanting to drive a car where you have more control over the timing of when you shift. It's an active experience for you while you're
Right.
doing
It's
that,
the ADHD solver. Right.
right? You have to focus or the car literally doesn't go.
Right.
But the flip side of that is perhaps the part that's negotiable is which type of car.
Correct. And I think about because you had mentioned a long time ago about wanting to have a house in Taos,
Right.
and you kind of listed out, I want to have a good experience and want the family to have a place to go, but it's 12 hours away or 13 hours away, however long it took you to get there. And it's like, well, this is not practical. We're never going to go. And so
Right.
how do I go find something that gives me the boxes of the stuff that's a thick desire, but maybe it's not in New Mexico, 13 hours away.
Right. Well, and to go back to your example, the part that is not negotiable for Amy is that it's comfortable for the whole family to be in the car.
Right. Well, and that was also the non-negotiable for my 9-year-old in the back. He's like,
There you go.
Dad, there's no legroom. This sucks.
I'm switched.
My 12-year-old, who's even taller, didn't care about the legroom because he's thinking, this car will be mine someday. I'm okay, Dad. You should get this.
It's new right now. Just get a new car sometime soon.
Because I need a car to drive here in a few years.
So I actually think this plays out too, though, if we can segue just a little bit
Sure. Yeah.
in terms of things that we have heard from our clients as well. And I think about one particular couple who were living up in the New Jersey area. and they weren't
Right.
entirely sure if they wanted to buy a second home. And so part of what we did was design a strategy where they could reduce their amount they were saving by a substantial amount. I mean, it was $90,000, $100,000 a year that they were
Right.
currently saving, that we were able to say, look, we can get you to the same place with less savings because the strategy is more efficient, assuming you do
Right.
that from today until you retire. But what they actually did is they used that money to check out kind of long term, or not long term, but mid-term rentals in
Right.
multiple locations to figure out where do we actually want to buy our second home. And they both were able to work remotely. So to take a year and spend a month, 2 months, 3 months in a particular location really allowed them to have the experience of what it was like to live there without actually buying $1 million house.
Right.
And that,
Yeah.
to your point earlier, if you have the ability to see what is this really like when the newness wears off, am I
Yeah.
still happy doing it?
Well, and I think it's so important on that end of it, especially with a house like that, is to your point, like, okay, when the vacation vibe wears off and we're just here, where are we going to go eat? Where's the grocery store? Do I like the people that live around here? Is this, oh my gosh, I never saw the traffic is terrible. And I didn't notice it before because we just got to the house and we just stayed here in the house for a weekend and we never left, right? And
Right.
so, or how do you function with this house? And could you really see living here full time, or is it just like, it's okay? I mean, I think about that a lot with Colorado. My wife she doesn't hate it. She dislikes snow for any extended period of time. I'll say it that way. And
Okay.
I'm like, oh, that'd be great. I love the snow. It's so wonderful. Isn't it pretty? And then I thought about it the other day. I'm like, yeah, it's pretty unless you have to be somewhere on time. And then
Or you
it's a
have to
real
shovel the driveway.
yeah, and then it's a real pain in the butt. But if it's snowing outside and you're like, hey, we're on vacation, we'll go hike tomorrow, well, then it's not a problem. But if it's like, I've got a meeting in 20 minutes, I need to get across town. Oh, crap, I got to shovel the driveway. And is there black eye? I mean, it's a whole different experience.
Right. And if you're listening and you're like, oh, how nice for that couple that just didn't have to save $100,000. Like I'm struggling to save a couple thousand, right?
Right.
Here's what I'll say. There are different ways to accomplish the same thing. So that particular couple is old enough, their kids are out of the house. You could put your house on the rental market, rent it out for a year so that the mortgage is
Yeah.
covered, and use the money that was going to a mortgage to do exactly what I'm talking about. So
Right.
there are always different ways to come at the same problem, to try things out before you make a big jump based on an idea you have in your head that may not actually match reality. And I think that's so key because there's so much when I think about dreaming about the future. What I find happening in terms of how I look at things is that sometimes my dreams for the future are not based in the reality of who I am. And I've seen that happen
Right.
over and over again with clients or with friends where they say, this is what I want. I have one friend in particular that comes to mind when I think of this, was a very
Right.
hard worker, really had control over both her income and her household, all of those things. And she was like, I just want to get married and stay at home. And I thought, that's interesting. And
Yeah.
then as soon as she got married, she was like, I'm miserable, and went on medication for anxiety and depression. And then a year later, she was like, I can't do this, and is now running a business again. And so
Yeah.
sometimes when we are experiencing the day-to-day pressures of our life, we look for exits, right? And that's where dreaming in the form of escapism comes in, where we paint this picture of this other life where everything is ideal and we don't have to deal with our reality. But that's very, very different frequently than living
Right.
a life that actually brings you purpose and fulfillment. And test driving those things is the best way to figure out whether that dream is real or just escapism.
Well, and I think we sometimes, and I know I do, I want to resolve that tension. Can't we do one or the other? Why does there have to be a tension? And I think I think sometimes tension has to be there on that side of it. And I like I'm talking about our friend, that tension of I want to do this job but I don't want to stay at home all the time because it's driving me crazy. Well, there's a tension there that has to get resolved somehow. And
Right.
so whether you do a job and you do it differently, but it's still doing something that fulfills you is very different than, nope, I'm going to be all in or all out. like being creative in the moment to go find something that works in the relationship, that works for what you're doing. Because I think on the other end of it, her husband on that side of it doesn't want someone that's miserable.
Right.
He's a very good human. And so if she's miserable and she's like, this is not working for me, then the prudent part of it, the telic part of it says, okay, well, then let's figure this out.
Find something where you are still fulfilled. Yeah.
And I think that the Taos for you, the Taos house is that such a beautiful story of that, of like, no, this is dumb. Like, this wouldn't work. How
Not
can
in
we
the
do
real
this in a
world.
different way?
Well, I'll be
Yeah,
really honest because we did the lake house so that it was more likely to work, but I still look at that and I'm like, we have soccer almost every single weekend, right? I
100%.
mean, I have this beautiful lake house on 6 acres with all this waterfront. And when I go there, it is like my favorite place on the planet. I relax, the dogs run around, everyone just, it's like a deep sigh of relief every time we
Yeah.
go from the whole family. We're present, we're focused on each other when we go there. But, I mean, since we went there for New Year's, we went there for 3 days
Right.
during spring break. We were there for Easter and we were there for Memorial Day weekend. That's only 4 times that we've been at the property over the course of this year. And when
Yeah.
I look at what our summer plans look like, which is usually when we spend the most time at the lake, our travel schedule is so crazy that I don't know when we're actually going to get to go out there. And so then there even becomes a measurement of, is this still the dream long term, or should we be making different decisions because maybe we'd get more fulfillment in a different way? And I don't know the answer to that. We're still figuring it out. And in
Yeah.
some ways, I think that's the point. It's,
Right. I think there's good tension there.
yeah. Well, and I read a quote this morning from somebody that was talking about how supportive their spouse was. And what they said was, my spouse always says, I would rather have memories than fantasies. And I thought that was such an interesting
That's a
say.
great.
I would rather have memories than fantasies. And so I think the act of figuring this out, I've always found I gain clarity through action. When I
Yeah.
sit still and I'm passive and I get up in my head, I can tell myself whatever, but I don't really know the answer. But through action, I almost always gain clarity. And that's the beauty of what I think you're doing with your test drive, is that you're test driving the dream, and that's providing you the clarity to know that this is absolutely real. And now I want to make a big investment in this because I don't just think it's going to make me happy. I know it's going to make me happy.
But I also know that the tension part of it is I can't have a two-seater. It doesn't make
Right.
any sense. It would be stupid, right? I mean, and to your point about soccer, right? There's just seasons where this doesn't work. It's crappy.
Yeah. It doesn't
It's
mean no,
not a positive.
but it also
Right.
doesn't mean no. It may just mean not right now. And I think being okay with that, because you have other dreams that you can realize along
Right.
the way, and you can bake it into, I know I want this, but this dream is going to happen in the future, is a totally acceptable outcome.
Well, because then you're not giving up. You're not going, well, I'm never going to be an underwater basket weaver. I'm never going to be an astronaut. It's like, slow down. You're going to be fine. Like, just move towards that end.
Yeah, and I think the flip side of this is, I look at it in our house. One of the things on Mike's dreams list was his Jeep LJ. Totally impractical. I mean, there's no world in which that can be the daily driver, but we were able to plan for it and fit it into everything else that we were doing. And then he ended up getting it. And I don't know how often he drives that thing. I'm not usually in it because it's not my dream, it's his, which is totally fine. I'm happy that he's living his dream life. And the kids love it, right? They love riding in that car with him. But even though it is probably ridiculously impractical, it brings him a great degree of emotional satisfaction. And there is no price tag you can put on that. I do think the danger that we run into, now to just talk completely out of the other side of my mouth,
No,
is
but I
that
think it is that.
sometimes we're so practical that we forego things that bring us real enjoyment because we don't feel like we can justify them. And I'm going to give one example of this from a conversation I had this weekend. I was talking to a girlfriend of mine, and I'm going on a retreat in October. I'm going to Bali on a retreat that one of my clients is leading. And And I am very, very excited about it because it's sound healing and yoga, lots of woo-woo stuff, which is so different than how I live my day-to-day life. And I think that sort of removal from the day-to-day gives you just a completely different perspective. And plus, I've always wanted to go to Bali. And the trip is ridiculously reasonably priced. So I sent something over to my friend to say, hey, would you want to go on this with me? And she was like, yes, but I don't know if I can justify it because if I'm going to spend a week somewhere else, I feel like I should take my kids. And my response to it was, right, because that goes into practical. There's guilt for doing something that would bring her a ton of enjoyment. And what I pointed out to her, and this was a huge realization for me, and maybe it will be for somebody who's listening right now too, is that I can't expect my children to live out their dream life if I don't act as a role model for what that looks like. And so if there is something on my dreams list and I don't choose to live my own dream life out of guilt or fear or whatever it is, then more than likely my kids are going to do what I've modeled for them. And so it doesn't mean be ridiculously imprudent, but if it works inside of the budget and it's something that truly brings you enjoyment, it's actually really good for the people in your life to see you taking steps that make you incredibly happy and fulfilled, because then they will be inspired to do the same thing. And the more people who are closer to their dream life and who are living intentionally towards their own fulfillment, and I don't mean gluttonous happiness here, I mean like a sense of contentedness and peace internally that then gets shared with others. I mean, that can't be a bad thing. So it doesn't mean just like, oh, I can't afford it, but I'm doing it anyways because it's my dream life and YOLO. It means finding the right balance between practical and prudent and finding where that matches up so that you are doing the right thing intellectually, but emotionally you're satisfied as well.
Yeah, but I also know you as a mom. And so I also know that if you're going to go to Bali for a week or however long that trip is, all the rest of the year, you're like a pretty amazing mom. You're like dialed in. You're like, they're not homeless. They seem to be well fed. They seem to be well loved. And so it is that balance because you're responsible on one end, like incredibly responsible for being a very good parent, and you struggle with it and you think about it, and it is the center of most of your thought most of the time, just because I know you. And so I think it's not incongruent to have that tension. And I think it's the right tension of like, is that really the right thing to do? Versus like, screw those kids, they'll be fine. Like that wouldn't be your reaction.
Well, right. And the thing that happens is like I usually do 2 this year. I think maybe no, it'll just be 2 this year because I actually got sick and took my other yoga retreat. But I usually do 2 of these a year. And the thing that happens is I reset when I do these and come back more intentional because I am removed from my daily life. And so it allows me to kind of re-engage with everything at a deeper level. And so there's lots of benefits that come out of it. I think even beyond that. And honestly, I'm just going to say this right now. That's why I think you need the car sooner rather than later. I think just the absolute joy that you get from driving it will it's a weird way to say it, but it will like ooze into the other areas of your life. Like it will seep through the cracks because when you're happy, the world is happy. And so it's, I don't see a lot of downside to it, especially here. You know what we didn't talk about that I think we need to talk about is your practical, prudent plan to acquisition. Can you talk about that for a little bit and then we can wrap up?
Yeah, we'll wrap up. No, and so what we did this past weekend. I said, all right, well, look, if I'm going to go get this car, it's going to be X dollars a month. Like I know what the car payment's going to be. I've modeled that out more times than I should have, and different theories of how to go do it, right? And so I thought, well, it's going to be X dollars a month. Why don't I just start putting that? And for you and I, it's towards policies or towards investments, right? I'm going to go put it into these accounts and I'm going to go start that monthly draft to go just put extra cash into there so that I can see what it's like in our budget without that money. And then run that for the next 3 or 4 months. And then if I decide at the end of it, it's like, okay, yeah, the lights still keep coming on at the house. The kids still keep getting fed.
We're not going backwards.
We're not going backwards. And there's not a lot of stress. And that's the big thing is how can we do this in a way that doesn't create stress for the system? And the system being the humans in the system, not necessarily the financial system.
Right.
Then we've tested that out and it either works or doesn't work. And then I know that it's not totally just a whim.
So what I think is a key takeaway from this as well is that by baking it into your budget before you do it, and simulating that car payment. You
Right.
are not just test driving what it's like to drive the car and thinking about only that dimension. You are test driving how it impacts the other aspects of your life because there is less money available for discretionary items if you are making a car payment. And
Right.
let's be really clear, because I think it's key to go back to this. You're putting the money into a whole life insurance policy that is a part of your overall plan with the intention of borrowing and paying back so that you're getting money onto the compound growth curve for the future and being very
Correct.
strategic about how you make the acquisition anyway. So
Correct. Yeah.
I just like how multi-layered your test drive is of this dream. And I think if it's something that other people start to think through, it might give them the opportunity to say, you know what, I really didn't like doing this. So this is not the direction I want to go before.
That's what I was hoping for.
Well,
Slightly. I was hoping this was going to suck.
and it
So
didn't. So I'm
my wife was
sorry. And
very
now
sad.
I'm excited for you.
Yeah. I remember driving around the curves in our neighborhood and my wife's like, oh, crap. She's like, oh, whatever. We're sunk.
Here we go.
So
Here we go.
here we go.
How funny. Well, I love this. Thank you guys for listening. If you have questions about how you could test drive your own dreams or just questions in general for us, feel free to shoot us a DM. If you're looking for me, you can find me anywhere you social media at The Wealth Woman. Eric, where can they find you?
Yeah. And you can find me wherever you use social media at Acorn Grove.
We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining. Specific financial concepts and advanced strategies are presented to you for educational purposes only. We cannot and do not guarantee their applicability to your individual circumstance. We encourage you to seek personalized advice from qualified professionals on all financial matters.
Provided content is for overview and is not intended and should not be relied upon as individualized tax, legal, fiduciary, or investment advice. Neither Wealth Woman, Acorn Grove, or the Wealth and Income Podcast, nor their representatives provide tax or legal advice. For answers to specific questions and before making any decision, please consult a qualified attorney or tax advisors.
All numeric examples and any individual shown are hypothetical and were used for explanatory purposes only. Actual results may vary.
Investing involves risk, which includes potential loss of principal. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. Guarantees are subject to the claims-paying ability of the issuing insurance company.
Life insurance should be purchased by individuals that have a need to provide a death benefit to protect others with insurable interests in their lives against financial loss. Life insurance is not a retirement plan, investment, or savings account.
Not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or any governmental agency. Insurance and investment products, not a deposit, not FDIC or NCUA insured, not insured by any federal government agency, not guaranteed by any bank or credit union, may lose value.
Please visit the Wealth Woman website disclosure page for other important disclosures.